Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Bush Tea Social for this year's U.S. Virgin Islands Literary Festival and Book Fair. Can we give our steel panelists another round of applause, please? Thank you, thank you. And we're also going to be joined soon by Yannick on saxophone in between some of what we will be doing here for this Bush Tea Social. But wanted to let you all know that if you're ready to eat, breakfast is ready, so you can go right ahead. And we're going to get started and give some poetry and do some other things, get Yannick on the saxophone. And if anyone would like to at any point, let us know, we'll ask. You can come up and share something as well. So I'm Dara Monica Cooper, here from St. Thomas. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. And now let's just keep clapping and see if that helps. Silent clapping. All right, so sitting right beside me, I'm gonna let her introduce herself as she starts the first poem.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here. My name is Rachel Phillips, and I'm visiting from the lovely island of St. John.
Jonian's in the house, yes. And as she searches for her first poem, again, we'll remind you that This is social, so we expect some talking, we expect people socializing. That's what this time is for. Breakfast is in the back. We have some musicians here. And so this will just be a really nice, chill event this morning. So please do enjoy yourselves, okay? So again, if you have any poems, prose, creative work that you'd like to share, get your mental juices flowing so you can get ready to come up. Okay? We're going to start with Rick.
Hello again. So, in November, I had the honor of being a guest poet at the USVI LitFest, and during one of the discussions that was held, Dr. Charles Wheatley said something that really touched me, and I was able to put together a short poem, and I want to share that poem now. It's untitled, at least for the time being. Every day we are becoming, like moons waxing and waning, like tides coming and going, like suns rising and falling, like stars sparkling and glowing, like time brief yet eternal. We were, we are, we will be becoming. So, in between poetry, I would love for us to also just kind of engage in a little bit of discussion about poetry, about writing, about being a poet. As you can see, I have like a setup here. I think it's always really interesting engaging with poets and kind of seeing exactly what their process is for performance. Are you really good at recitation? Do you memorize your works? Do you like to write them down and have them in a book? Do you like to print them out? There's a, what's called,
do you get your inspiration from? Where do you get your inspiration from?
sure. We got a question from the audience about what kind of inspires us in our poetry. For me, it's a little bit of everything. Sometimes it's personal experience, sometimes it's just something somebody said that spoke to me. Very rarely will I kind of look for a poetry prompt and try and write based off of that. I usually just write when I feel called to. Yes.
So I would say the same for myself. So I ended up eventually putting a little phrase to it or a little word, therapoetry, because I only write when something comes to me, which it's fleeting here and there, you know, but I usually am doing it more for myself, just for processing. I also am trained in narrative poetry, and so I use the same process just to kind of help to work out different thoughts and things. And sometimes I share them with others, but not often. Like, I put this one together with a lot of those therapoems for the purpose of, okay, so people are like, when are you going to put them all together? So I just did that. So this is a little chapbook, nothing that's fully edited and all of those types of things, of thoughts and therapoems that came to me. And thank you for that question. It could be either way. So narrative writing, and it doesn't have to be poetry, it is a therapeutic process that people can be trained in to help you use storytelling from internal of things that have happened to you and just process them through a story, and you can guide it towards a positive resolution. Or if you don't need to do that and you just need to express whatever it is, you just write it all out, and that way you don't have to be it because it's still within you and maybe causing some harm internally. So it is just a facet of a different form of art therapy. Thank you for those questions. And again, we expect that there will be lots of social engagement. That's what this morning is for. So please feel free, and if you can, let's keep some of the louder conversations closer to the back of the room, and that way up front, people who are sitting and interested in listening can do so easily without the competition of the very interesting conversations I'm sure everybody will be having. So what do we have back there for breakfast? What do you all got? A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Tell us, what's you buying? Dukana. Right, we got some bush tea. What else? Chop chop.
I think I see some pate.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna go into, and you asked the question, and one of the therapoems that I wrote, I tend to do them to kind of do some self-motivation, and sometimes it helps other people too, like I said. So this one, I take pictures a lot, so sometimes I add photos, very small, but it's just, at the beach, sometimes you see the birds going in and coming out and doing their thing. And I just love photos of birds. And again, I often don't share them, so a lot of what we do for ourselves, sometimes can help others, but a lot of times we can keep it for ourselves. This one is take flight. In the morning, after night, from the pain and in the fight, through the darkness and the light, take flight. Though you'd rather go astray, take the chance and find a way. You can make that change today. Take flight. When all you see is fear around, listen inward for that guiding sound. Dig your roots deeper in the ground and take flight. So sometimes they're really, really short, and you find yourself in a dark moment. And if you need to stay dark, I always tell people, don't go light if you need to stay dark, right? But when you want to shift, at least do something that can help yourself get there. Raven, you have another one for us? And is there anyone else that has any poetry or prose or creative writing to share? After they finish masticating. Yes.
So, playing on that theme of flight, I have, and then also kind of drawing from chapbooks and things like that. I recently put together kind of my first poetry manuscript. Trying to get it published, we'll see how it goes. I don't want to do all of this poem because this one will appear in that chapbook. I can do, I'll do a little piece. This poem's called Firebird. All I know is to bathe in red-hot inferno. I do not know of becoming clean in any other way. The pain means I've done well. The tears welling in my smoky eyes emphasize the evil I am trying to release. Should the flames cease, what is left? I don't know the answer and that terrifies me. So I think that with this first chapbook I'm trying to do, I'm also drawing on a similar idea of healing through poetry. I played around with the title a lot, but I really wanted to draw upon the myth of the phoenix a little bit. And really this idea that what if a phoenix doesn't know that it's a phoenix? What would that mean? How do they see themselves? How do they see their regeneration if they don't know that it's coming? In that way, you're kind of a bird that's on fire.
Interesting how things just naturally flow when we allow them, right? Again, we're going to have some steel pan music soon, but as she brought up, some saxophone music soon by Yannick. But as she brought up the Phoenix, I turned to the page of a poem called Phoenix Crouching. And so I'm not going to ignore that when it happens. And right after this song, I'm going to ask Yannick if you could go ahead and, right after this poem, I'm going to ask Yannick to go ahead and play the saxophone a little bit for us. So Phoenix Crouching, this is a part 1 to a part 2 that maybe I'll do later if there's time. I smell the earth through my pores, open from sweating fermented impurities. I feel the ocean churning around and within, keeping us constantly connected while seemingly separating us. This burning, so discomforting, yet so comforting. Ultimately, breaking me down to the point of being one with the dust, settled. There is only the wind. There is only the sky. Phoenix crouching. As pain, time, and growth pass us by, preparing us for flight. Thank you. So now we take a look on our right over here. We have Yannick on the saxophone. Don't y'all want to know more about this young man?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So my name is Yannick. I'm 17 years old. So music is a strong passion I have. I've been playing the saxophone for about 7 years now. And ever since I started, I just always kept on playing. I also play soccer. I play for the national team on multiple occasions. So yeah, music, I just love music, and it's nice to be here today.
Fantastic! Oh, perfect! Winning!
Okay, he's going to do one more for us, and then we'll switch right back on over to the poetry. For those who are ready with their poems, you can come and have a seat right with us. So this is the last song from Yannick.
big one. I gotta move this one too.
Hello. Thank you so much, man. He's a wonderful, wonderful saxophonist. Very important that we support youth and their passion. congratulations. We're thankful to have you here.
Only 17.
Only 17. My goodness.
Don't start singing the song. This time around.
Winning!
There you go.
So, we have a quick announcement to make. We have a poem, and then we'll make a quick announcement.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Majestic and I will be reading a poem from my mom's book, Shealing. It's called The Constant Scissors That Cuts the Night. 6 more bullets in our atmosphere at the strike of 5 a.m. Wondering, did anyone else hear? Each one like a lashed tonight on the backs of slaves. Might 1, 2, or 3 lead another to their graves. For every bullet counted, like an automatic mechanism of an old warehouse that is haunted. Genocidal realities like a slap in your face. Wake us up every morning as if we need to be reminded in this place that this paradise of ours is nothing more than their playground. It is the land that was, is, bought, sold, and cherished as we sing, swing, climb, fly, fall, run, play around. May the wisdom of the ages capture us, and like acid rain wash away our lack of insight as we open up our eyes to the constant scissors that cuts the night. Just sick and tired of hearing gunshots this early in the morning. Wake up, my people, wake up. Thank you. And now for the announcement. So when you check in at the front, you're supposed to get a wristband. So if you do not have a gold or white wristband, please meet me to the table in the back so I can band you. Yeah.
Thank you, Majestic. The question was, what's the difference between the colors? Majestic's response, we run out of gold. You know, we go with the flow. So as she mentioned the wristbands, it reminds me of another short poem that was part of the Third Poetry line. And this one is called Cufflink. Cufflinks. Acids. You tell me I'm broken. So I'm going to start with the first line and give you some context. So that you could be anything that you fill in the blanks for. Okay? Past relationship, past job, past experience, other person, or yourself. So imagine that these are cufflinks. You tell me I'm broken, yet still wear me on your sleeve. Turning me to the side, this way and that way, only to find others with my shine. Funny how you think they don't see the rust you stained me with from behind. That's cufflinks.
So, I would love to turn it over to our guest here on the stage, Mr. Jerron Richard. It's very good to see you. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, everyone. I am doing well today. And today I'm going to be sharing a couple poems from my book, Poetry Roots of the Baobab, that I published in 2017. And My name is Rani Richards. I'm an author, educator, director, and visual artist here at St. Croix. So my first poem, I would like to stand up because I feel very uncomfortable. Just waiting for this camera.
Yeah, and we're keeping the technology in mind because we are streaming live on YouTube for those who want to share that with friends. So USVI LitFest 2026, people can go on YouTube and share, watch, so on and so forth.
So this poem is called The Warrior's Rainbow. What is a garat or a gasso? And why do we all label them Santo? He's an alien, a product of immigration. She's light skinned, so she's Puerto Rican. And his hair is long. He must be a Trini. But in reality, he's from St. Lucia. We must learn to stop judging one another. In Caribbean reggae, thick roots grow. Speaking of the Caribs and Taino. Shall I repeat? Didn't you know? We are spirits of light with hues that glow. Prisms, prisms, it's all that he sees. Kaleidoscope of cultures in colorful unity. Prisms, prisms with colors that glow. Prisms from crystals of the warrior's rainbow. They love the bridges of the Caribbean. They love all West Indian. Not America or Great Britain. Not Denmark, Copenhagen. Not Portugal or France. We must take a stance. Acknowledge our common heritage and history. We share wounds of brutality. We should be one tribal family. Thank you. And my final poem that I'm going to recite today from my book, this one I'm going to read, is called Myanmar. And this is a poem depicting some injustices that took place in a very far away location that I decided to document. I think I'm going to sit down with this one. August 25th was when it all started. Rohingya insurgents and Myanmar security forces. The military did well to enact their frustration, executing hundreds to thousands in acts of retaliation. They say they're the most persecuted in the world, the Rohingya minority. Muslims in a nation dominated by Buddhists, so they suffer from brutality. Persecuted and discriminated for their religious views, denied the right to worship freely, restrictions on the right to marry and own property. And Myanmar's military wields considerable power with systematic rape as a weapon of war. They say it's a human rights disaster, for over 900,000 have fled so far. Families on the run to Bangladesh, escaping Myanmar atrocities. Thousands fleeing from what was once home. Children on the Naaf River, swimming all alone. Women and young girls being raped non-stop. Men and young men being shot in the back. A humanitarian catastrophe, a global outcry. Denial of citizenship, no legal rights. Men beheaded, boys with bullet wounds, bodies buried below the earth to cover up what they do. Expulsion from home, so where are they to go? They've been living there for centuries, but hate and prejudice manifest atrocities. And Desmond Tutu spoke of the suffering and the pain when we do not connect to the one human vein. For though we may worship and look distinctly, There are no differences in the web of humanity. So innocent children are being killed day by day. Some stay with their families, others run away. The world needs to do something for my brothers and sisters in Myanmar. And until someone steps in, genocide is justified as a weapon of war. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give it up one more time for Jerron. So before we hand it off to our next two guests here, I wanted to draw on that human connection. I think one of my favorite things to write about in poetry is kind of the things that connect us. This is one of my favorites that I've written. I wrote this, maybe 2 hurricane seasons ago. Over in St. John, well, here in the Virgin Islands, we were hit by a tropical storm. Everybody was worried, everyone's nervous, but thankfully, the worst damage that most people had was the loss of fruit trees and the fruit that they carried. And that was such a common conversation that I found myself having, and that birthed this poem called Hurricane Soup. Pumpkin from Auntie Patsy, green papaya from the neighbor, coconut dumplings made with love and frustration. Granny grew that tree for years. The roots hold my family's history, a long story of tears and sweat and blows and cussing. Lots of cussing, but lots of love too. I can taste Granny's kisses in the stew. It's warm, salty, and familiar, like this feeling we're all sharing. Gathering what's left in the rubble, making meals of the messes storms leave behind, sharing fruit and other produce and calling on each other to feast, to hold space, to remember.
So we know it's 9 o'clock, and this is when the transition is happening to the next part. We were told to allow, we have a couple more poets, and we're coming off. So this is what's happening now. So you want to go ahead. Would you like to go first? Okay, so welcoming Richard Warburg.
Nope. Does it work? Okay, good morning. So this is the inaugural reading taken from a book I wrote this year. It's based on facts that happened in January in Minnesota. I think you'll recognize it. And I have the beautiful Majestic who's going to help me read it. There are 2 parts, Grace and Cole, and Majestic is going to read from Grace. I've tried to write it in iambic pentameter, and I hope you don't mind if I stand as well. I think it's easier. Oh, you can.
Are we standing?
I prefer to stand. So your Grace.
You're going to read that no part?
So this is 2 ghosts at the crossroads. There's darkness and there's 2 spotlights. Side by side, Grace is standing in one and Cole in the other. So you have to imagine that all these lights don't exist. There's just a spotlight on Grace right now. They do not see each other and they speak to the audience.
Upon a Tuesday did I meet my death. The heavens wept in gray, the streets ran ice, and I, who kissed my son at morning's gate, did not yet know what fate awaited me. I dropped him at the schoolhouse door and watched his small form disappear through painted halls, and spoke the words we'd spoken every morn. I love thee, to the moon and back again. He turned and smiled, oh, that immortal smile, and answered as he always answered me, and back again, mama, and back again. Those were the last words that I heard him speak, the last of all the 1,000 tender words that passed between us in his 6 short years. They say I smiled at him, the man who killed me. They say my final words before the shots were these: "We're good, dude. I've no hard feelings." And then, what grace lives in the name that I was given? My mother chose it, knowing not what weight that single syllable would come to bear. Grace, the unmerited gift, the blessing free, the love that asks for nothing in return. I tried to be the vessel of that word, to pour it out on everyone I met, to be the sunshine in a world of shadow. And in the end, I poured it on my killer. I gave him grace. He gave me 3 cold bullets. But I will not begin with bitterness, for bitterness is just another wall. And I have spent my life as one who builds not walls, but bridges, doors and open windows. So let me tell you who I was before: the frozen street, the gun, the shattering glass. Let me tell you of the light I carried before the darkness swallowed it forever.
Upon a Tuesday did I kill a woman. The heavens wept in gray, the streets ran ice, and I who kissed my children at the dawn did not yet know what monster I would prove. What beast lies coiled within the soldier's heart that woken strikes at shadows? I did see her face, a face of kindness, not of war, and yet my hand, unbidden, found the gun. They say I followed training, perceived a threat, defended self and brothers under arms. They say I am hero, patriot, a man who did his duty, nothing more. They say these things on television screens, in press releases, statements to the court. They say I acted as a good man would when danger reared its head upon the street. They lie. And I who built my life on lies, who learned in Ramadi to wall off truth, who buried every horror in a box and told myself the box would hold forever. I know the taste of falsehood on my tongue. I know how easy 'tis to speak the words that made the nightmare into something noble. I know because I've spoken them for years. But here, upon this stage, before you all, I'll speak a different language. I'll confess not what the lawyers want, nor what the press would have me say to save my tattered name. I'll tell you what I am, a man who broke, a soldier who came home but left his soul in desert sand 6,000 miles away, a father who could not protect his children from the very monster he'd become.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to you. Please introduce yourself if you could.
Good morning. I'm Charlene Abramson Joseph, the author of the book, The Vienna Cake Mystery, and I'm going to read the poem, Enigma. Face black, mouth black, hands and feet black, back sprawling, hard work wings, brow crease with life worry lines. On his tongue, mango sweet words, peppered with bitterness. He takes less toil, scrubs the bathroom, rakes up all the leaves under the breadfruit tree. With the same mouth, he says, "You ain't ready yet." Hostility, a blanket he uses for comfort. How far back does it go? A boy smelling his onions, tasting man things, or back to days of shackled hands and feet? Why are you wearing them bracelets? Are they still holding your mind? He takes her foot in his hand and he rubs away the years where she's walked. And as he rubs, his pain seeps out like hot bush tea. Man like he knows responsibility. Up when the cock crows, gone walk, carries a tin of last night's food to keep him all day. With the same mouth, he says, "I feeding myself. I only allowing you to feed me." Indifference, cuts like a dull butcher knife. Loving a good stock island man is like pouring brown sugar on cod liver oil.
Just checking. So we'll have now a poem by Cleone Lynch, and then we'll wrap this up for you.
Good morning. That sounds a lot better. All right, so I am going to do my poem entitled 16.3%. What you think happened when Master Tech what was in his for the taking? My neighbor string berry, yeah. Yours own berry over there. But it don't really mean nothing. Cause we connected by tears. Tears that water fertilized soil and germinated potent seed. Seed that was violated from conception and was to produce nations and laborers, slaves by another name. Scatter like chicken feed, waiting to devour fruit ready for picking. Creating interconnected nations, binded by an invisible thread that contracted the muscles of the womb. Out of many one. After all, you suck on the same titty as me. We connected by the whispers in the dark, woven through seas and forests alike, binded by the song with no words, tangled in the roots of the sugar cane. What make you think you so different from me? Eh? Trace the D, the N, and the A. You see? Your color don't mean nothing. He took what wasn't his for the taking, leaving a trace of 16.3 European behind. My blood is your blood. His blood is hers. All are we binded by the invisible thread, woven by an interconnected history that invoke tears rather than joy. All are we is one.
Thank you. Okay, as we now wrap up, thank you all for participating. Again, we are Dara Monifa Cooper and Raven Phillips Love, St. Thomas, St. John, St. Croix, One United Virgin Islands. We'll share one more for you as we transition out. The reasons why we gather. We come together to heal, to repair, recovering ourselves, our soils, our souls, resilient in our individual and collective struggles, enough to keep us from totally cracking, though dried and brittle, rehydrating ourselves with our ever-flowing wells of love. We restore our faith in the people of who we are, what we are here for, and why we continue to be. Reunited, recovered, resilient. We are home.
Thank you. And to close us out, I will do this poem called Our Lovely Madras. A bright, blinding sun shines upon this roll of vibrancy. It streams through the window, gleaming on our lovely Madras. This bolt of fabric is bright and bold. It's worth much more than its weight in gold. Yes, sir. This Madras hair, she rare. She beautiful. She spellbinding. Its pattern is a mixing of people laid across fabric, a pattern of crossed paths and oceans. This stretch of cloth holds a collection of crossroads, many spaces of magic and connection, strength and perseverance, a passageway for the ancestors whose presence is felt in every stitch. This colorful array holds many colors, each with their own place and purpose. There's no such thing as an out-of-place thread here. Each one adds on to a beautiful landscape of reds and blues and greens, a beautiful sight to see. How lucky are we, this unique blending of people, place, color, and culture for one another. A melting pot of hues from present to past, our lovely Madras.
Good morning, everyone. All right. So we're going to transition, and in doing so, we want to show our appreciation for our hostesses right here. All right. Raven and Dara, thank you kindly. Definitely appreciate that segment. And now, if you enjoyed breakfast, raise your teacups with me to the Bush Tea Morning Social. All right. Okay, so we're going to transition right now and move into general sessions right here. And to start that off, here she is, I'm looking for her. I'm going to just ask Alcest, we know Alcest, to say just a few words.
Good morning, everyone. I don't really have any new words to say, but I want to say, before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we have two other presenters here. We have Ms. Edwidge Dandicat. She is, I should say, a native to the Caribbean writer. She started out with us. She won prizes with us in those early days, and she's never left us behind. She has always been there for us. So welcome, Edwidge. I want to thank my friend Margaret Barry, who agreed to find her in Miami and travel to the Virgin Islands with her, and then take her to the hotel, and then take her to the book bacchanal last night. And Margaret is my neighbor's sister, and so that family has adopted me, so I'm part of that family. So thank you very much, Margaret, for that. And I have to tell you that there was some wonderful fried fish last night, and everybody was grabbing the fish. And we saved the one for Edwidge. So she had the fish wasn't winking, but you know, she got a fish last night. Okay, but before I begin, I'd like to, yesterday, what I generally do in the mornings before the festival starts is I call a certain gentleman, and he's shut in and could not, and generally don't come anymore. And so when I called him, and I didn't get a pickup, I called one of his children. I said, you know, I'm trying to get a hold of your dad, because it's the LitFest time, and I'd like to talk to him about that. We visited him, Phyllis and I visited him, and we couldn't leave the prison out. So those pieces are beautiful, so if you have an opportunity, please make your way to the table and offer a little donation. And we have another guest, it's Michelina Charles, Hazel Charles. Michelina came from Trinidad, and she's been traveling for days. She traveled from Trinidad to Barbados, to Antigua, to the BVI, took a boat to St. Thomas, and then flew over from St. Thomas to St. Croix. And I knew that anybody who's going to do that really wanted to be here. I really appreciate that. And she came because we put out a call for papers, and for the 40th anniversary celebration. This year is the 40th anniversary of the Caribbean Writer. We're going to do a special celebration when we publish volume 40 in a few months. But we acknowledge that this is the year that the Caribbean Writer was published. And so she submitted a paper, and we accepted several of them, and she wanted to deliver her paper. And so she is all the way here. Michelina, could you stand so people can see who you are? Thank you for coming. The other individuals on our team include Michelle Albany, Chris Spinn, and Michelle Albany is currently convalescing from an illness in Georgia. And Michelle would have been here and very much involved, but we want to reach out and say, we want her to get well soon and return to us. And then there's Orville James, who coordinates our transportation. He gets all the headaches when somebody's not picked up and somebody's picked up late. And I call him, I say, how come so-and-so didn't get picked up? He's, we kind of do that, but it's love. I try to go back and soften it up and tell I'm sorry because sometimes, you want to make sure that you're perfect. When people arrive, there's a driver there, but sometimes it doesn't work out like that. But we mean the best. Then there's Ivani Jeremiah. Ivani Jeremiah is something else. She handles the green room and everything else that I need. If I can call her and say, we need to do this, she'll volunteer immediately. We have Devon Taylor, who works along with Mr. Clavier in technology. Mr. Clavier hiding behind the wall. He's like that. Stephanie Shalana Brown, Director of Cultural Education, also works with us. And then there's Adrian Wajasa, that we've never met personally, but he's been with us for 12 years. And sometimes he works for zero, but he handles our technology, the website, and lots of other things. Since we've met Adrian, he had 1 child, now he has 3. But we've never met him. One day we hope to bring him to the island so that we can actually tell him in person, thank you for all that he does for us from a distance. Then there's Phyllis Nielsen, who needs no further introduction. And she doesn't like me to do this, so I better move on. And then there's Dara Cooper, who today Dara helped to facilitate the Bush Tea Morning Social between 7 and 9. Cleone Lynch, one of our poets and a teacher over the complex, and also one of the committee members. And then there's Lizette Llanos from St. Croix Central High School. Powerful firebrand. I mean, workers. And Keba Petros, who's our driver. All the things I should cover. Oh, and welcome Dr. Cooper. Dr. Cooper is a member of the original Caribbean Writer Board, and he was served on the editorial board for a number of years until he retired, and he and I are always in touch. You notice that today he even put his children on the program, put them to work. Yes? Okay. Yes. Okay. So Yvette is telling me that the salmon balls are here, just in case anyone is interested in that. I have Miss Inez Banis made some salmon balls for us this morning. Okay, so basically I'm finished with my introduction, and I want to also welcome Mario Picayo. Is Mario here? Mario Picayo is the editor for Little Bell Caribbean Books, and he's published a lot of Virgin Islanders, especially during the young Francis administration. He actually published me first. My first book was Aoife and the Mosquito, and since then I've done like 6 other YA books that he has also published. But he's published a number of, he's located in New York and in the Virgin Islands. He's a Virgin Islander, a Cubano, St. Tomian, and he's also here. So welcome, Mario. Thank you, Yvette. You can take the mic now.
Thank you, Alcest. Okay, so we're going to keep moving, and I'm not sure if Alcest recognized our fiduciary, Deanna James. Did you? She's here. Okay, so we couldn't do this without our fiduciary. The service and the services that's provided by the St. Croix Foundation. Tremendous. And so we want to recognize Deanna James, invite her to the podium just to say a few words. Tell her thanks, many thanks, all the thanks for the work that you do to support the LitFest every year. So please help me welcome Miss Deanna James.
Thank you and good morning to all invited guests, to our guest authors and participants. On behalf of the board and staff of St. Croix Foundation, we welcome you to day three of the 2020. I was supposed to be here yesterday and got distracted because I have a major convening starting on Monday morning. So apologies for missing yesterday. As an English major and a writer, the VI LitFest is a particularly special project for me. In fact, each year, the event gives me such hope for the future of St. Croix and the Caribbean, because I believe so strongly that storytelling holds magical power in communities like ours, power that has the potential to spur movement, to heal, and to advance society. To Alcest and your small but mighty team, thank you for your perseverance, your passion, and the literary legacy you are building for the territory. The Virgin Islands LitFest represents so much of what St. Croix Foundation's founders valued and held sacred when we launched the organization over 35 years ago. As the preeminent fiscal sponsor in the Virgin Islands, serving local nonprofits and community-based projects like the LitFest, our fiscal sponsorship services have affirmed our prioritization of civil society. By enabling burgeoning nonprofits and community-based projects to build the capacity they need to grow strong, we have enabled many to take root and to incubate while focusing their attention on simply doing the work. In 1990, when St. Croix Foundation's founding board was conceptualizing our organization, they were ever inspired by the raw nobility and potential of philanthropy, defined as serving through the love of human was simple. If we only gave or granted nonprofits a fish, we would feed them for a day. But by teaching them to fish, we could feed them for longevity. Today, despite not being endowed, as most community foundations are, and despite having nominal local donors and local government support, St. Croix Foundation has been the conduit of over $50 million in strategic investments over the past 35 years. To date, we have also served as the fiscal sponsor for over 250 local nonprofits and community-based projects. We believe it is no accident that St. Croix has the most dynamic, collaborative, and culturally rooted nonprofits in the territory, an outcome we hope we have made a small contribution toward. While it has not been easy to stand steady as a small community foundation charged with steadying smaller local nonprofits, last year, after many years of tireless advocacy to national philanthropy to include the territories, and more specifically to deepen investments in the USVI, the foundation was awarded a $1 million Humanities in Place grant, the largest single grant we have received from a national foundation. To date, the majority of those funds were regranted to deserving local culture and arts nonprofits like the VI LitFest. As the foundation looks to the future, we are committed to continue living by a simple principle: take only what we need and give more than we get. It is a humble virtue of balance and enoughness that has empowered our organization and our work for 35 years. We will also continue to do our part to meet our mission of marshaling resources and serving as a catalyst for the advancement of the people of the Virgin Islands. To all the authors in the room, we honor you. In a world deeply burdened by the lack of humanity, and in a world deeply distracted by the unprecedented pressures of revolution, thank you for keeping stories of humanity alive. In our eyes, you exemplify the ideal and nobility of philanthropy. In fact, you are all philanthropists serving the love of humankind. Alcest, I am so incredibly grateful to share space with you. I am inspired by your diligence and persistence in driving this work forward, for using literature and storytelling to continue to awaken, to expose, and to heal our community. Thank you for your leadership, and never doubt how steadfast St. Croix Foundation remains in supporting your mission and your vision. Thank you, and good morning.
Thank you so much. Just a second. Yeah. On behalf of the Virgin Islands Literary Festival, we just want to give you this little tangible token just to say thank you. Okay, so let's go. Thank you, everyone. And I think it was yesterday somebody asked about the keynote speaker, and I said they're all keynote speakers. But I think we're going to look at the first session today that many of us have been waiting for. If you've read Edwidge Danticat, raise your hand. Look at that. I know I would not be disappointed. All right, I took a chance, but yes. And so right now, we will bring to the stage Edwidge Danticat. And this is our opening conversation. Starting off the morning sessions, the interlocutor for this session with Edwidge is Shauna. I know she's here somewhere. Shauna, a writer in her own right, one of our local writers. And so we welcome them to the stage for this conversation. Let's give them a round of applause. Welcome to St. Croix, Edwidge. Welcome to our Virgin Islands Literary Festival stage. Thank you, Shauna. Take it away.
Good morning. It's so nice to see everyone out here. And thank you so much to Edwidge Danticat for honoring us today. You've been a steadfast friend of the Caribbean writer, and I personally am so honored and humbled to lead this conversation. I am so stressed out, y'all, so give me some grace.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, to be with all of you and to celebrate the Caribbean Writers' 40th year. I got my start, as Alcest said, with the Caribbean Writer. So it's a really big full circle moment for me. And no need to be stressed. It'll be fine.
So I wanted to start with discussing your most recent work, We're Alone. In discussing your most recent work, We're Alone, which is a collection of essays. And I appreciated your construction of the essays, but I have to admit that it was at times a really difficult read for me. Filtering it through the lens of what we're going through today in our community. And in We're Alone, you reference an essay by Raha Georgiani, an immigration attorney and law professor, who basically said that our treatment as Black people gives us a strong claim for asylum protection. So I'm, reading this essay in the context of what's happening at the Supreme Court with birthright citizenship, what's happening with, the draconian deportation, and you use a phrase, you wonder if President Barack Obama would also qualify for refugee status. And your use of the phrasing, by the time you read this, figures heavily in that. What would you add to at this time? Are you still writing that letter? And what would you add to it in this time and at this time?
So I'll contextualize a little bit. So We're Alone is a collection of essays that's based on two premises. One is that a friend of mine, Gina Athena Ulysse, came up with this idea called rassemblage, which she defines as an assembly of people, spirits, ideas And then the other idea is that the essay is a body of water. And it's something, you know, we in the Caribbean know it, like if you're in, and it offers the possibility, if you're a writer, do you stand on the shore or do you step in? And so by doing the pandemic, and it's which one of the earlier times I attended this conference, I started getting letters from, you know, I was writing, I'm still a letter writer, but I remember when I was here, when I was in Haiti and my parents were in New York, I would write them letters, and then the letters, both their letters and mine would always have these lines like, you know, I hope you're well, grâce à Dieu, but also like, by the time you read this, because we're processing in, not like now with the instantaneous communication, but we were processing in the commuting time. So you would be like, by the time you read this, this may not be true. By the time you read this, things might have really gone to hell. You know, by the time, so you're processing that in. And I feel like that with these essays too. When I was writing some of them, it was 2020, and what you mentioned about this really very intelligent lawyer's argument that would people who are, if you're just pulled over on the side of the road because of the color of your skin, because of who you are, would you qualify for asylum elsewhere? And now we have certainly, in this moment, it is an ongoing thing. I'm Haitian, so it's even a little harder on us the fact that people can be pulled, you know, just, you know, you can go to a Home Depot parking lot and grab a whole bunch of people, or, you know, even it's not limited to just, you know, people at Home Depot. At Columbia University, where I taught, people are taken from the dorms. So it's just it's a period of time, and I was so happy to hear all of the poets, and people are really addressing it. I think it's a kind of time where we need our poems, where we need our poets, where we need these voices, where we need that kind of rassemblage, you know, like rearranging of these ideas, imagining killers and their, you know, and the people they have killed, and conversation, because that's where we have those nuanced conversations about not just what's happening now, but what comes next. What do we do next? How do we survive? But how do we also keep something worth sustaining for the next generations?
What are you describe yourself as a witnessing writer, in the words of James Baldwin. How important is it for writers, and there are many writers, many truth tellers in this room, how is it important for writers to be honest in what they're acknowledging now and witnessing now, and how do you think it will inform the stories that we tell now and in the future?
Well, I think, I mean, that's also why it's so wonderful to come to literary festivals, because you get to see other writers, you get to hear what people are thinking and working on. And I think, of course, you know, Toni Morrison said about, you know, she tells the story in an essay she wrote in The Nation about feeling depressed during like the first Bush administration with all the wars, and someone called her and said, you know, and reminded her that this is when writers go to work. And that work looks differently for many different people. For some people, for some writers, it's working with incarcerated people, incarcerated writers, and bringing their work out. For other people, it's working with young people. For some people, it's actually putting their bodies on the line. But this work, I think, also to witness, because we live in a time of such revisionism. You know, you're constantly being told that what you're seeing is not what you're seeing. It's very Orwellian. I don't think we've used Orwellian so much. You know, so I think that's where it's important to have so many voices out there, to have people recording, to have this witnessing, as James Baldwin mentioned.
As a Caribbean woman, I learned of Haiti as a site of the first revolution, as one of the first successful revolutions of enslaved people, and St. John, of course, is considered one of the earliest. Yet a lot of what we read about your homeland, about Haiti, is really rooted in trauma, right? We don't hear a lot about its triumph. We hear a lot about the trauma of hurricanes, earthquakes, their treatment of patients by the Dominican Republic and the United States. But in reading your work, we see the everyday lives of everyday people. And as a Haitian American writing about your homeland, can you describe this intentionality in your writing to not just speak about the hard things, but to speak about the joy?
Well, one thing I also want to point out to folks, like Haiti has always had and continues to have a really thriving literature. We have really wonderful writers, and I think sometimes that doesn't come across the Caribbean because they write in French or in Haitian Creole. But we have wonderful, like a really strong roster of writers and that are writing in Haiti now, who are in Haiti, who continue to be in Haiti, who work with younger poets who sort of like, or marraines or parrains, godmothers or godfathers to different events like this. So that exists. And like many other places, we also have a diaspora of writers, and some of them, a lot of them in the United States, including myself, and writers who have been next generation, like Roxane Gay, and Myriam Chancy, Dimitri Léger. We have a really good group of writers, certainly. And I've always taken for granted, I guess, because sometimes you don't always see until people are coming to you with sort of their stereotypes. Like I've always taken for granted that we're a multiplicity of voices, we have differences, we're not a monolith. And so, but one of the reasons I started writing was that so I could go home. When I was 12, you know, I grew up, I was in Haiti. My mother and father moved to New York when I was, my father when I was 2, my mom when I was 4. And for 8 years, they were in New York, and they came back once, was to, you know, and they were undocumented. They had stayed out their visa, and then they came back at some point after my brothers were born to get their papers, and I saw them in that 8 years doing that visit. So it's a very Caribbean story where you stay behind with the family. But when I started writing, when they sent for me at 12, at 14, I started writing to go home. Because every year my parents would say, we're going, but we were like 6 people. Going home meant like 6 plane tickets back then. There were no bargains, really. And then you had to bring stuff for people back home. So it was like a trip that took so long, we never got to go together. I got to go when I was older, but I read, and I read feverishly, and I wrote so I could go home. It was a way that I would imagine myself back home. So for me, that was very important. And it felt like lame to say to people, and I think I understand people in, you know, who in areas that people consider war zones, like they forget that, yes, people fall in love, yes, they get married, yes, they have existential crises too, yes, and all these things, because you're only seen in a certain way. And Haiti is certainly reduced, so reduced in that way, and especially also in the contemporary with the armed groups and all that is happening now. But you know, people just don't realize it. And I think that's the power of literature too, that it can allow you to have such an intimate relationship with a character that then, I always hope, that then makes people want to read more writers from Haiti.
Right. And in reading We're Alone, I was not only taking a lot of notes, but I was writing down the names of all of the authors that you referenced. And I was like, oh, I got to go back and read her. I got to go back and read her. What writers have inspired your early work, and who are you inspired by now?
So I remember the first, like in Haiti, an iconic writer for us is Jacques Romain. And he wrote a book called Masters of the Du Gouverneur La Rosée. It's about a man who goes to Cuba at a time that people from Haiti were going to Cuba to work in the sugar industry, and comes back and tries to find water for his village. And it's such a powerful, and if you've read like Sylvia Wynter's The Hills of Hebron, it has a similar, without so much of the religion, but it has that like feeling of like wanting people to, you know, just like self-determination in this small village. So that for me was a very iconic novel, because I come from, like the people we call Moonmorn, like the people of the hills. Those are my people. That's where my family's from. Their first migration was to an urban area, was from Beauséjour to Port-au-Prince. So and it was the first time I recognized my grandparents' stories in a piece of literature. So that was a very powerful book for me. And Marie-Vieux Chauvet, who was a writer who wrote during the dictatorship, and actually her novel, Amour, Colère, Folie, Love, Anger, Madness, which was translated as that, was for a while she was about to be published in France, and the book was kept because, like, the whole publication was pulled because she was told by the dictatorship that if the book was published, her family would be wiped out. Oh, wow. So just really like the weight of literature has always been so powerful in my life. So that's why I would create Dangerously, to kind of honor those types of writers who were really writing under the gun, basically. And for them, who every act of publication was a risk to themselves. And first book I read in the US was Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it also has that feeling, her mother was elsewhere. She was raised by a grandmother. And then James Baldwin, you've mentioned already, he's a witnessing writer. Writers now, I think we have such a really good group of diaspora writers from the Caribbean to, in September there's the Brooklyn Lit Festival, which was also the Caribbean Literary Festival, is in September, and so many folks come through, Nicole Dennis Ben, Marlon James, I mentioned Miriam Shamsi, and also we have writers from the Dominican Republic like Angie Cruz and Jaquia Diaz from Cuba. So it's a really, I think we've been, especially the group that I came up with, we were able to kind of find a community in each other when we were just kind of navigating that space of being people from the Caribbean and the US with very different stories, with very complicated and like a multiplicity of stories, but still having this common background.
How do you protect your writer's voice? You just talked about diversity in writers, but how do you protect your writer's voice in an environment that is almost forcing us to be resolutely American and really not recognizing all of the values and all of the experiences that we bring as people of color, as people from other places, and certainly not an environment that doesn't recognize the diversity of the world and of our diaspora? So how do you protect your writer's voice?
Well, I think and the writers in the room will know this, you in a way have to separate that act of writing from the publication, right, initially. It's very hard, even when I teach, it's hard to get young people to accept this, that it's such a beautiful privilege to just be with your work, right, without expectation, to just be in that moment of like seeing some vague thing become a solid idea. So for me, that's like where I'm freest, I like most enjoy the work before. And I think you have to, the way to protect it is to write it like nobody's gonna read it on some level, at least initially, right? To write like the thing that your soul most wants to produce. And sometimes it's not going to fall into some easy to publish thing, but at least it'll be authentic, at least it'll be you. And so to do that part of it where you're just creating, to really enjoy that and put the best. And I always, I tell people young people I teach, like that's the part you most really control. It's the creation is the part you most control. The rest we don't have. Whether you're published or not is some people sitting around a room and like, I want this in my issue, I want that in my issue, or some publisher who said, oh, I've already have my Haitian writer. That has nothing to do with you, right? And so I think that to protect, the way you protect your voice is to really dig in. And writing is a very solitary act. It's sort of like, for most of us, this is kind of like where we finally, like to come to things like this, like, oh, I finally have to put on clothes and I have to like be social, So it's just like that part of it, to enjoy that part And then the publication, of course, you try to find people who understand your vision. There's so many stories of writers, like again, that thing of like the tokenization where people would be like, oh yes, we published somebody from Jamaica last year. And, But there are thankfully some publishers now, like Akashic publication, they have the whole series of the Noir series they've published, Caribbean writers, and I know Johnny Temple, that's his mission, to do that in the US, right? And they're more and more, I think also we have at the same time. I was happy to hear about the publisher, you know, like Alsace mentioned, to have those folks who are going to be like, oh, you don't have to put a glossary in the back of your book. You don't have to over-explain what, you know, Kalaloo is. You don't have to, just like that idea of just like, that you will be understood. So, but that has to be, that part has to be, that there has to be more home for the kind of writing that we do. So that if we're rejected by some publishers or a bigger publisher, that there will be a home for this kind of writing elsewhere.
Thank you for that. So you've written fiction, nonfiction, and children's books. Do you have a preferred genre?
I think I like to genre hop. Like poetry was my first kind of genre I loved, and then I was like, nah, I need too many words. But I still maintain from poetry, and I was so happy to hear so much poetry from last night to today, like the economy of it, like that the fact that you have to capture so much in imagery and sort of, and sometimes like the discipline of that. But fiction is my first love, really. I love writing fiction because you can incorporate poetry, you can incorporate nonfiction, research and other things. But for the immediacy of things, or for having to say something instantly, I also love the essay. And that you could do so much with the essay, like the lucidity of it. Again, after writing this, after finishing We're Alone, I did start thinking of the essay, and that was Erica Cardwell, who's an essayist and art critic, wrote this notion of the essay as a body of water. And I've really maintained that to sort of kind of let an essay lead me where it wants to go, to like that fluidity of it. So I guess what I'm saying is I love all these forms, but fiction best.
You were relatively young when you wrote your memoir. And I've always, I always tend to think of memoirs as something that you write when you're older, right? Because it's generally a reflection of a life that's lived. But you wrote yours when you were relatively young. What motivated you to tell your story at that age?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a book called Brother, I'm Dying, and I always said that book is not a memoir in the way that memoir, it's like a we-moir.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to write. It wasn't a book I wanted to write. I started writing it when my uncle died in immigration custody at 81 years old. He was a minister in Haiti who, during difficult times in Haiti, had a visa, had all the proper papers, but when he got to Florida, his house had been burnt down, and he told the immigration officer that, they said, how long are you going to stay? And he says, well, I won't be staying the usual 30 days. I may stay longer. And then so he was arrested, detained, put in a detention center in Florida called Chrome. And when he went up to have a hearing, he became sick, and the medic at the hearing said, oh, they all do this, he's faking. And he was taken to the hospital where he died, chained to the hospital bed in the prison ward of the county hospital in Miami. So when he died, they gave my uncle, because he's the uncle who raised me in Haiti while my parents were in New York, and he was always saying to me, like, because he had an extraordinary story. He grew up in the hills and came to Port-au-Prince, had his church, had a clinic, had a school. And so he was always saying to me, like, when are you going to write my story? When will you write my story? And I was like, oh, we have time. And I would visit him in Haiti, and we would talk, and so when he died, they gave me his briefcase because I was the only family member also in Miami. Everyone in my family was in New York, and I was pregnant with my first child, and we're like navigating getting him out. So when he died and I went to the hospital, they gave me the briefcase, which had a very lengthy interview that he'd had with the immigration officers, and they had everything. They fed him. It was a very detailed account of his time in immigration custody, except the medical records. We had to subpoena for that, like FOIA and everything. But in that, he had written an outline of what had happened to him, to the church, like, so, and then I thought, oh, this is the book he wanted me to write for him. So I started really writing the book, and there's a line in it, and at the same time, my father had pulmonary fibrosis, like end stage, and was dying. I was having a baby. My uncle who raised me was dying. And writing the book was really the only way that I was able to process all that. And there's my daughter's name Mira, because of my father died a month after she was born. So all of that is in the book. And I had never written a book so quickly. And I realized that part of the reason was that the book allowed me to visit with them, to kind of also, my uncle never got to meet my daughter. He was one of those uncles who were like, oh, will you ever get married? And he did get to meet my husband, but not my daughter. And so it just was like, I loved this idea of like having my daughter, who was the next generation of my family, and my father and my daughter, and my two fathers really all in the same book. So the book was even if it's so much about me, but it's about them and like sort of how that world around me. And it was interesting when the book came out, people were like, one of the reviewers said something like, oh, she never mentions that she's this author, she wins awards. And it was interesting, like for me, it never felt like I was writing like about this person who's sitting here. It was like I was writing about my uncle. I was writing about like us going around together when I was a kid, and he had, it was just kind of like, it was so detached. Until that person mentioned that, I was like, oh, it was completely detached from sort of like this public person, but this was for them.
But I've seen in a lot of your work the theme of death. When I read Clear of the Sea Light, which I loved, it's such a layered story. It was at times a mystery, a whodunit. I saw so many elements of mysticism in there, but it begins with a death, and that's a through line throughout the story. And have you found death to be a consistent theme in your writing, and how can creatives, how can writers approach this topic?
Well, I mean, I think my uncle, who I've been talking about, was also a minister, and my weekends as a young girl was like Friday night church service, Saturday night funerals, Saturday morning funerals, sometimes two, or funeral in the morning, wedding in the afternoon, and then Sunday service on all day Sunday. So I remember, seeing like the idea of like people dying for us was very, normal. And then we were told, because you live with a minister, you're told this is just one stage of our very long existence. And then next door was the Vodou temple, where they're like, when you die, you go to Guinea, you return to Africa, like ancestral land. So it always felt like wherever you fell on that line of belief, that death is just a transitional stage, that maybe that we shed this body, but we become something else. And I think over time I've really, there's in C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, which when both my parents died, people gave me copies of. He makes like, there's a promise made between him and his wife to be like, whatever, when you go, like, if there's a veil, promise me you'll try to pierce it so that like I know, right? And so like I do have that belief, like I always think like the people who love us are always kind of trying to piece that veil as much as they can to give us signs and signal. And maybe that lines up with the power in literature, because you have to believe in a way in the impossible, to like you have to suspend disbelief in a certain way. So I think I approach it like that's how I think of death as a, I don't know, I'll probably go out kicking and screaming at the end. but I saw like in both my parents such grace in leaving. My mom, I was with her when she passed, and it was the greatest privilege of my life to like see, like help escort out the person who brought you into this world. It's an extraordinary thing to see. So in a way, it's like it's been a journey, and when you're older and you've lost more people, and to have, you know, listened about this gentleman who just passed, you know, and we say in Haiti, like when someone like that dies, a mapu tree falls, and a mapu is akin to a banyan with all its age and its wisdom. Like we'll say a mapu tombe, like a great tree has fallen. And so there's all these different ways that I think I try to approach it. And of course the characters have very different beliefs, but it's this idea that, for me, at the center of it is that we live on, whether it's in the lives and in the, you know, in the hearts of the people we love, but we live on in some ways. And of course, if you write, you live on through literature, right? You live on through your words. And there are writers that I've never met that their words are with me every single day.
In Clear of the Sea Light, it begins with, you know, her mom passing, right? And throughout her young life, her father is searching for a mother for her, and she is also, as we later see, searching for her mother, searching for signs of her mother. And how did you navigate that storytelling between the mother, the lost mother, but all of the other women in that story who were mother figures?
Well, because that's really how I grew up. And so when my mom left Haiti, she, you know, I remember it's one of those, I didn't know she was leaving the day she left. So I thought my brother and I were leaving with her, and then, you know, one of my first memories is of being peeled from my mother, literally. And so, and then when I had my aunt and I had my different aunts, and, you know, it's like that kind of community where all the aunties were your aunt. Sometimes they watched too closely. You couldn't eat on the street, and, you know, and yes, that it was still true, that idea where anybody could whip you. So for better or for worse, you had all these people watching out for you, especially since they knew that your mother was away. And so that community, you know, and I've had younger people in my life, like if a mother dies young, like sometimes they're like, who's gonna take this child? Who's gonna, like, the children are raised among this idea that we all, you know, are responsible for the other children. It's like I remember in the Bluest Eye, it's one of the books I read early on too, where Toni Morrison talks about, like, even people in the communities who are not necessarily loved, but we can't let them be outdoors. Like, we can't let them just be on the street, because that's a shame for everybody. If a young girl is roaming the streets, that means the community is responsible. Like, the community
and needs to take care of her.
Exactly. That's a condemnation of the community who neglects that young person. And so that's really kind of how it was taken, and I had that model, and also have also had to think about sort of like family. And I think, as you know, in the Caribbean, we know this is beyond like your mother, father, grandma. It's like family is wide and broad, and also we can invite people into our families. And so that's really, for Claire, the father is try to situate her, because you know, the book does begin with a death, because he's a fisherman, and he's always thinking, like, I could go out now and not come back, and just have a plan for his daughter. And so like to establish who among the community where he would like her to be if he can no longer be her parents and she already doesn't have a mother.
And with that, thank you. I see the timekeeper giving us
Thank
the eye.
you. Thank you all.
Another round of applause for our guests.
I want to say thank you to Shauna and to Edwidge for that riveting conversation. Thank you very much. Another round of applause, please. I see Charlene is in place for our next conversation. This one between Mario Picayo. Mario is like no stranger to us. I'm not seeing him. Oh, here he is. Okay. So Mario is a publisher, and I swear he has published just about everybody in the Virgin Islands. So we're going to talk a little with him. Charlene will be our facilitator here. Mario, please come on up, Charlene, and let's hear some more about Mario and his publishing works, okay?
Good morning. So I'm going to share a little bit about Mario, but before I give you his bio, I'm going to tell you a little story about Mario and I. In 2014, I started writing a book, and I sent it to Mario, and I waited for 3 years. I didn't hear anything. But Danica, David, who I eventually got to illustrate my book, she was working on the illustrations, and she said, I said, you know, Mario Picayo. She says, I know Mario. And I said, well, I sent the book 3 years ago. I never heard anything. About 2 weeks later, I got this email, and it said, oh, I'd like to publish your book. So I don't know what happened between Danica and Mario, but the book did get published. And so Mario and I have been speaking since 2017, and this is the first time I've seen him face to face. So with that, I'll tell you a little bit about Mario. Mario Picayo is a cultural activist, an audiovisual activist, an author and publisher. He has divided his time between New York and the U.S. Virgin Islands for 2 decades, after living full-time in St. Thomas for the 2 previous decades. Mario works on initiatives promoting reading and book production, mostly in the English-speaking Caribbean. He serves as editorial director of Editorial Campagna. Its children and youth imprint is Little Bell Caribbean, and the new Guani Press, dedicated, though not exclusively, to works of indigenous authors of the Americas, including the Caribbean. He is the author of over a dozen works, including A Caribbean Journey from A to Y, Read and Discover What Happened to Z, a children's book that sold over 100,000 copies, and in 2001, the book was presented by the First Lady of the Virgin Islands to Michelle Obama as a gift for her daughters. His career in the cultural world is vast and varied. He has worked and continues to work, time permitting, as a photographer, a videographer, a researcher specializing in celebrations in the Caribbean and the Americas, such as carnivals and traditional ceremonies. He has given lectures and presented photographic exhibitions on the topics in the Caribbean, South and North America, and Europe. He is a producer, a writer of a weekly television program, Gente y Cultura, People and Culture, in New York Public Television for 12 years. The program was awarded Best Community Program in 2002. He worked as a Spanish language magazine editor for Sesame Street and is a founding partner and executive director of the cultural organization LART, Latino Artists Roundtable. The New York State Assembly publicly recognizes his artistic career and his work as an advocate and promoter of Latino culture in 2004. As a videographer and photographer in the Virgin Islands, Mario was part of the team that documented the cultural bearers of the U.S. Virgin Islands in the 1990 Smithsonian's Folklife Festival in Washington, D.C. He was also a part of the territory's delegation to the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta and of the 2017 delegation of artists and scholars participating in the conference and art exhibit in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the purchase of the Danish West Indies by the United States in Havana, Cuba. His latest book is entitled Bromance and the Hummingbird, released in 2025. It was a project requested by the Gypsies Carnival Troupe of St. Thomas to serve as inspiration for their costumes and float. The troupe, with Bromance and the Hummingbird, won first prize in their category last St. Thomas Carnival. And Mario, it should be said, is a member of the Gypsies. And so now I will turn it over to Mario that will share with you his journey as a publisher.
Thank you for that lengthy biography. I truly appreciate that you mentioned so many things. I don't know, sometimes it sounds unusual. All the jumping, that seems to be jumping from the outside, but if you see there's a very linear kind of trajectory, and that all the works that she has mentioned are Caribbean-centric, most of them, and very much about culture. Culture from the audiovisual and the literary perspective. And Carnival, and by the way, your book on Carnival and Jacques Mel was, I love your work, I have to say that, I'm a fan. At the time when I read you for the first time, I was mostly reading in Spanish, and mostly the boom, the Latin American boom of Garcia Marquez, Juan Rulfo, and then I read you, and it was an extraordinary experience. So thank you for that. The last time I came to this stage was exactly 10 years ago, celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Caribbean writer. I spoke, and as Alces said, we go way back, and so I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Alces, for this amazing event and all the people that make it possible, including the sponsors. I've been asked to speak about the work that I do as a publisher, particularly of children's books in the Caribbean, but I need to, and I mean, that's already such a long biography, but I need to tell you a little bit about something about, besides being from Cuba and from Havana, and Cuba is in the news right now, I am in constant communication with Cuba. My friends, my colleagues, my family, even people that have illustrated books in the Virgin Islands that live in Cuba. And so, as you probably know, Cuba is right now blockaded by the US, not even to receive oil. Therefore, even when we have generators at hospitals, the hospitals are not running. No water. It's difficult. I got a picture this morning at 7:49 of people just lining up with buckets trying to get water from a truck. The most popular word, the word you hear the most right now in hospitals in Cuba is celular, celular. because there's a surgery or a woman giving birth and they need cell phones to illuminate. So we've been sending all kinds of things. Now I got to send some gel for ultrasounds. We're sending solar panels for people to charge their phones, among other things. And well, the situation is not good, but also do not believe what the press says. Cuba, like Haiti in a sense, but they're countries of tremendous resilience. And Cuba has gone through this before. Maybe not as bad, but almost. And if you speak to them, the first time I spoke after the blockade, it was like, almost, what do you need? They were going, don't worry, just relax, we got this. It helped, keep helping, but we got this. We're not going to be defeated. So anyway, my formation, even if it was for the first only 8, 9 years in Cuba, is in a town called Guanabacoa. And Guanabacoa is a town near Havana, on the other side of the bay, of the city of Havana, that has an interesting history. It was created as a village in the 1500s to gather whatever was left of the Taínos, of the indigenous people, in that part of Cuba. In the eastern part of Cuba, to this day there's Taínos, but in the western part, which is where Havana and the big cities were, they were eliminated, almost eliminated, and then they were rounded into this village so they could be civilized and counted. That was a big part of the project, was to count how many are there, what are they doing, and again, the process of civilizing them, as I used to say. So the town was a village of indigenous people, the only one left. And little by little, because it was already kind of way out there, freed slaves started coming in, and runaway slaves started coming in. There was always that bond. Remember, the first people that felt the whip in the back was the Taínos. The first one that had to work the plantation were the Taínos. The first one that got the damage from the diseases that they didn't know existed were the Taínos. So that bond was very easy, very organic, to see another people in chains, another people going through those troubles and welcoming them in. So Guanabacoa, where I'm from, has that history of resistance and this history very based on an indigenous and Afro traditions. To this, nowadays, if you go to Guanabacoa, you will not hear about the Indian side, not about the Taínos. What you hear is about the Afro. Because Guanabacoa, in all of Cuba, it's the epicenter of Afro-Cuban religion, of Lucumí or Santeria. And it is the center. Anybody that wants a good trabajo, as we say, a good job done, has to go to a babalao in Guanabacoa. You can get it in Regla, you can get it in El Cedro, you can get it, but Guanabacoa is the real deal. You can find a Yoruba spoken in Guanabacoa that people from Yoruba land in Nigeria come to listen to because it's diasporic. It's ancient words that are not even used anymore. And when they do the shells at the beginning of the year in Guanabacoa, the babalaos in Nigeria, they exchange the readings because they know that there's a tremendous power, a tremendous authenticity in the Santeria and the Yoruba tradition in Havana, and in Guanabacoa in particular. All of that. So what does it have to do with this guy publishing children's books? What it mostly tells you is that one more. And remember, those first years I spent, there was no way it could not be politicized. This is Cuba. We're talking about the Bay of Pigs. We're talking about the missile crisis. We were in Cuba. We were the ones that were going to get bombed. So this wasn't a theory. This wasn't Russia and the United States playing chess. No, we were the ham of the sandwich, as they say. We were the ones there. So, and of course, the Cuban Revolution, Fidel, Che Guevara. This is where I grew up. So there's no way that you're going to leave your country. You're going to leave those roots, which, by the way, my parents did not leave because they were counter-revolutionaries. They left because my mother was scared having 4 kids in a place that could get bombed. And where eating was difficult because of the blockade, because of the embargo. The embargo really changed the complete dynamics of the revolution. Like Eduardo Galeano said, they didn't do the revolution they wanted, they did the revolution they could, considering the circumstances. So my house, I did not grow up with a hatred towards Cuba. I did not grow with that mindset of, oh, he said, no, 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 no. There was a tremendous respect in my house for that. We both come from countries that have, to this day, are paying the price of our independence, and a high price. Never, they have the powers that be never forgave Haiti and have never forgotten Cuba. But anyway, so I come out of that atmosphere, of that world, again, that we didn't live with hatred. And luckily, my migration, I say luckily, maybe for some of you that migrated to the north, you find that was fortunate. But my migration was not south to north, it was south to east, because where we moved was to Puerto Rico. So my following formative years were in Puerto Rico, right next door. And then at 17, my father has a chance to move to the Virgin Islands for work, and I moved farther east to St. Thomas. That's been my trajectory, from 8 Cuba, 9, 17 Puerto Rico, 17, and on mostly here. And what happens, and that was something that was spoken a lot yesterday, for any of us that migrate, culture is never the same. Culture cannot be taken for granted. The moment you leave your culture, you start paying such attention, particularly one that also had to learn English later, better English later on here. But you can never take anything for granted. Not the way that people dress, not the way they speak, not what they do. Nothing. You're a sponge trying to fit. And that, I think, a lot of Nada, I think, spoke. I think the panel yesterday spoke a lot about that. We are attempting to reconstruct our identity in some way, but there's no way that we're also going to forget the identity that we started from. Those roots are strong. Roots don't leave you. My mother says that the heart never migrates. You know, you move on, but you have that. So with that in mind, for me to go to a school, to go to several schools, and then later as an adult, in places where there was such a non-linear, let's say, history, where the history was so, not complex. Complex is good. There's nothing wrong with complexity. But what the signals, the message wasn't straight. The message was all over the place. I mean, I can give you the simple example, even what happened with a dollar bill. You know, you're looking at enslavers, and still, you know, we're here living in a place with 90% of the people who are descendants of those, you know, enslaved people, and we have to honor it and use, you know, Jefferson. So that is the mindset that brought me to publishing, honestly. But first to Carnival. Carnival is my link to publishing. Carnival is my link to everything. I saw Carnival for the first time when I was 8 years old, and it terrified me and it amazed me. I loved it and I was scared of it. For different reasons than your history. And your adventure with Jack Mel is a little different. From going as a child, not going and then coming back. But in my case, what I found with Carnival, when I was always looking for what is it that unites us, what is it, all these histories, all these different histories of colonization, the British, the Commonwealth, and the American flag over Puerto Rico, the American flag. And I found Carnival. I found that Carnival was our unifying force. It was the one celebration that we owned, the one celebration that showed our true colors, our true identity. No matter what job you had, you were an artist in those days, whether as a reveler or as a painter or as a singer, calypso. I found such power in Carnival that I basically became a Carnival photographer. Actually, there's a book somewhere, one of them, about some of my Carnival work. But I spent 30 years, basically, documenting carnivals throughout the Caribbean. And you only see the power of Carnival when you see it from that perspective. You can see it as powerful in your town, even if it's Trinidad, the biggest. But when you really see what Carnival means is when you go to Sugar Mass, you go to Vinci Mass, you go to Trinidad, you go to Cuba, you go to Haiti, you go to Dominican Republic, which is unbelievable manifestations of Carnival. And that gives us a cohesiveness that I found that politics weren't showing me. I found that unity of a Caribbean identity through Carnival. And again, I mean, it was also an identity based on joy, based on music, based on food, based on dance. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And that gave me hope. And I still have it. That somehow Carnival is, there's a key to Carnival. Most of the revolutions in the Caribbean has happened during Carnival, including the Cuban Revolution. They started Carnival. Many of them, many uprisings have started at Carnival. So there's also that political angle to Carnival. Dr. Werner was saying yesterday about how sailing shows you physics and how sailing could be used in education, how so many things are math. You could do a complete curriculum from K to 12 and cover everything you can think of based on Carnival. From physics to math, to history, to geography, name it. I challenge you, all of you, to say something that is not going to be covered with Carnival. You want to see men dressed like women? Go to Carnival. You want to see women dressed like men? You want to see people not dressed at all? You want a class in physiology? Just go to Carnival. Look at those bodies, describe them. So to me, again, I found this powerful force in Carnival that has kept me still going and still photographing and filming when I can, giving lecture, presenting photography about it. I'm going to go now to children's books. I publish other things. My cultural roots, that is strengthening my culture and getting to know it fairly well in the Caribbean, gave me the job with Sesame Street when I edited for Sesame Street. It wasn't my skills as an editor. I had no idea what I was going to do. But Sesame Street is very sensitive to all kinds of, they have to be perfect. They attempt to be not offend with, an imbalance of race, an imbalance of color. And when I went to the interview, I didn't know. They told me, just sign it. And I went, not thinking I was going to get the job. But it was a friend of mine that worked with me on television. And the guy, he tells me what my job was supposed to be. I said, well, honestly, Ira, I don't think I'm qualified. I cannot do any of those things. And he looked at and said, you see, you don't understand. I got the staff that is going to do this stuff. I can teach you this stuff. What I cannot teach you is cultural sensitivity. And that's what I need. And that cannot be taught. And that's the job you're going to do. What you're going to do is read the material and find anything that to you doesn't smell right. That's to you is anything that jumps at you, mention. And don't worry if it's the smallest thing. Just say it, because that's what we're looking for. And so I took the job. I did the job for a while. It did teach me something about editing and publishing and all that. Now I'm going to skip. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to this. I wrote this book, Career and Journey from A to Y. This is way before I thought I was going to be a publisher or anything like that. And I am not a publisher. I publish. I am not a writer. I write. In Spanish, we don't say, what do you do when you ask about a career? You said, ¿a qué te dedicas? What do you dedicate yourself to? So I'm always also playing in my head sometimes with English and Spanish and trying to understand things. And so it's that. What do you dedicate yourself to more than what do you do? And right now I'm dedicating myself to I guess, publishing. So this book came about because I had children, small children at the time in the Virgin Islands. There was one bookstore, a Dockside bookshop. They called, remember, Dockside bookshop. And we go to buy books for children. And the place, remember, this is way back. This is over, this is more than 30 years ago. Yeah, this is 30-some years ago. There were a lot less books by people of color then than there are now. Not that there's enough yet, but there were less. And I go in there and I couldn't find anything. Not about the Virgin Islands, not anything that my children or their friends could relate to. And so I picked an ABC. And it had the usual, the A is for apple, Q is for queen, that kind of thing. So I started joking around with, what about A is for avocado? And Q is for that. And so the idea of a career and journey from A to Y came about. I attempted to publish what you were saying, at which I tried so many of the big publishers. Nobody wanted it. Nobody would touch it. So it took many years and doing other work that I am not going to talk about. Yeah, that's another one. That we got this published. And I absolutely had no faith that even the book was valuable anymore, because it had been so many years. I thought there must be 40 years, like 40 books like this. You know, things have changed. You know, we have evolved. Not that our politics, present politics, say anything about evolution, but I thought at least in the book sense we had evolved. And I come back home to St. Thomas because I was living in New York at the time. I presented it to Myron Jackson before he was senator. He told me, no, we need this book. And so I presented the book. The book had a tremendous demand. And after that, my guiding force has always been what the people want. Not really what I, including your book. It's always been what do the people want, because that's what I learned from this. I didn't think the book was any big deal. Honestly, I mean, I put my heart into it. But we all do as writers, and sometimes, you know, I was pleased with the book, but I didn't know if the audience was going to be pleased with the book. And it did. It did work well, and it sold well. It was given to a lot of people. Michelle Obama got one. I have a picture of her with the book and all that, which was nice. And then the governor of the Virgin Islands saw it. It was Governor DeYoung at the time. And he said, you know what, we have a project. Cecile, he's the first lady, said, you know, she wants to give books, instead of toys for Christmas, she would love to give a book to the children of the Virgin Islands. And your book seems to be a good candidate. So I said, okay, fine, you know, and we did it. And we did the first book. The people said, are you going to do the same thing next year? To the governor. And so they came back to me and said, listen, do you have any other books, not maybe by you? And I said, no, I have one book. That's it. That's it. That's all I got. I said, but I know people, I know writers. And so Alces, I ended up with Alces Lewis Brown's manuscript for Ifa and the Mosquito. Wonderful story. Well illustrated, local, fully local. Local illustrator, local author, which is what we were looking at. And so we published that one. And the people wanted a third. And so we published Tregenza Roach's The Lesson Box. And the people wanted a fourth. But not only that, then they started talking about the brain drain in the summer. Why don't we do some books for the summer for the children to take home for the summer and read? And so they said, do you have, and then we started the summer reading program. I don't know if any of you remember the summer reading challenge, the Governor Summer Reading Challenge. Okay. That was part of our project as well. So then we started publishing 4 or 5 books for the summer, one for Christmas, and suddenly we were looking, searching, asking for authors. Anybody has a manuscript? Please, you know, bring it to us because we want to continue it being very local. And they showed up. You build it, they come. So we had our little publishing company, and the writers kept coming. And the books were excellent. And some of them might not be excellent to me from a let's say, the standard literary standards, you know, but the community loved them. And that was another lesson. Listen to the community. I was not writing to try to hit the best time. We were not publishing to hit the New York Times bestseller list. It would be nice for the author in particular. But our audience was our village, very much. We write and we publish for the people that were interested in reading the books, mostly. If it goes from there, that's wonderful. That's great. But that's what we really work for, and that's what we really want to get to. And what that also taught us, and again, these are all lessons en la marcha, como decimos nosotros. These are lessons you learn as you go. I did not go into this whole thing thinking, oh, and then I'm going to then try to get children to read this book because they're going to identify. No. That all, the theory came after the practice in this case. The practice came first. The boots on the ground, as they say. Schools, teachers, parents, children, feeding us. What is it that they want? And then us giving it back. That's how it works, not the other way around. Not sitting there and saying, oh, you know, this is good for the market, and then that. When I did a presentation in St. Vincent, because I also worked down island all the way to Grenada. Dominica, we've done similar program in Puerto Rico too. But in St. Vincent, the first time they met me, I went to the Department of Education, and I sat there and I said, what do you need? They looked at each other. They go, you're the first publisher that asked us what do we need. they usually show up with a catalog of what they have. And then we pick the things that work better for us. You're the first one that just says, what is it that you need? What books do your children want? What is it? And that was a great way also to open those markets in that sense, because they saw that we were willing to listen and to publish their work, whether, again, not by the normal standards of including the British publishers, who need to also pay bills. We work with very, very little budget. And we found a formula for that, which I'm going to talk about, on how to work with minimal budget.
Mario, there's some authors in the audience right now that have been published. I see Danica.
Danica.
Danica David, she was my illustrator, and she's published her own book. Alcis Lewis Brown, Tiffany Yannick, her book was over on the book, I Am the Virgin Islands. Are there any other authors that Mario published? So he's been doing the work here in the territory.
Yes, yes, yeah. But so little by little, we developed principles. So it wasn't like the principles were developed and then we did the books. The books, the principles were developed through and one of them was to attempt to keep the kids' imaginary grounded. I went to Lockhart School one time, and during Christmas season, and there were pictures painted on the walls by the children. And I would say 80% of them were Christmas images from the north. Snowball, reindeer, Santa Claus, snow, 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 snow. So when it was time for me to present, I said, so how many of you have ever seen snow? It was like 2. I said, and if you say, oh, but that's healthy, the imagination is soaring, it's going to new places. It is, unfortunately, it is television. It is Disney. It is again an imaginary that gets taken away when we start thinking that our Christmas without snow is second class. When we think that the way we look is second class, that we want to imitate because we think that what we have around us is second class. And those are the messages I was receiving, and those are the messages that we started publishing against. We said, you know what? Let's show these kids what they have around them. Let's remind them of the extraordinary world they have, the extraordinary history, the extraordinary environment. No, you don't have to go all the way to the other part of the world to find amazing things right here. And so we have dedicated ourselves to that, to show in images and words the world of the reader, of the young reader, so that at least in our books, they're going to get the other information from others. And they're going to get it. It's not like we're trying now to monopolize so that they only think that, no. They're going to, the forces on the other side are way, way, way stronger than ours. Who can fight with Disney, So, but our point is that, at least let's give them that. Let's give them the faces of the people, the voices of the people. Let's give them keep their imaginary here so that then it can go somewhere else. And so we ended up with doing something, kind of our principles, I can say, as our editorial philosophy are Caribbean-centric, anti-colonial, and inclusive, respecting everyone. And the anti-colonial is simply accepting who we are and putting our history in a context that makes sense. I wrote an article in 2020 about how, we need to do something about that. Two points in my article have taken place. One was the taking down of the statue of King Christian IX in Emancipation Garden. You could have a park called Emancipation Garden with a statue of a Danish king in the middle. Man. No. And I didn't say destroy it. I didn't say change the history. I didn't say burn it. No, I said, and which is what happened. I said, put it in its context. Put it in Fort Christian. It's a historical piece. It's part of our history. I'm just saying contextualize it. Put it where it belongs. This is the past. And it is not a pretty past. So, again, with respect, as we said, everything with respect. I'm not saying to disrespect them, but over there. And the other one that happened, is that the governor, at the last state of the territory took off the symbol of power of the governor. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. I never liked the idea of a governor. Probably Ms. Dantica here doesn't know, but in the territories, the symbol of power of the governor. It's a sachet, there you go. Like a ribbon, a sash, with 8 flags of the colonial powers or the flags that flew over the Virgin Islands. It ends with the Virgin Islands flag. It has the U.S., Denmark, the Knights of Malta, France, England, and one that nobody understands, which is Germany. It's number, because it's supposed to be 7. We have the 8th, but there's a story to that.
He didn't wear it this time.
He did not.
No, he didn't wear it this
that's what I'm
time.
saying. He finally.
And the other thing is, he also, for a little while now, the picture of von Scholten that stood so prominently in Government House has also been removed.
Yeah, little by little. And these are symbolic, minor details, but I think it gives us a coherent history.